What is going on in St. Louis? We've got construction cranes in our skyline. Are we in the middle of some kind of development boom? And if so, is it good for all of us? Stay tuned.
And on Stay Tuned, you drive the discussion. We bring local experts, journalists, and civic leaders together to have tough conversations for a stronger St. Louis. Tweet us your insights on tonight's topic, and you've got a seat at the table. With a few national experts and a panel of community members, this is the show bringing more light and less heat to the issues that matter. So stay tuned.
Well, welcome to the show tonight, and welcome back to the show, Todd Swanstrom from the University of Missouri, St. Louis. Todd, over the past, I don't know, let's say a few weeks, months, we've had shows on talent retention, entrepreneurship, transportation, and every one of those shows, the conversation somehow goes to development. IKEA, what's being built here and there. Why are these conversations overlapping seemingly at development, or do they?
Yeah, I think they do. Cities are about human interaction, face-to-face interaction. And you get these projects like the Loop Trolley, like the Arch Grounds revitalization, like IKEA. These are places that bring people together. And I think we get a sense in St. Louis, there's a kind of a urban buzz, a feel that we're kind of turning the corner and we're creating more density, more intensity of human interaction around these big projects. So I think people are excited.
Okay, so is buzz, does buzz equal buildings?
Buildings create buzz, right? The right kind of buildings. You know, one of the problems we've had in the past is what I call the edifice complex. We think that building, a big building is what it's all about. And, if you build a major project, but it's isolated from the fabric of the city and there's not the interaction and the excitement around it as it's woven into the fabric of the city, it fails. But I think in this case, we're seeing projects that are part of the urban fabric and are really going to ignite a fire under the city in a way.
Okay, that kind of leads right to the next question I had written down here. What do we know about how people connect to the infrastructure around them? That you're kind of our philosopher in residence. Take that one on.
Yeah, sure. I mean, once again, the right kind of urban amenities and urban public spaces require or promote an interaction among people from different economic classes, from different racial and ethnic backgrounds, from different religious groups, and they kind of mingle and interact, and that's what makes cities exciting. Not that everybody becomes buddy-buddy, but that you form the kind of interaction that smooths relationships, that creates the exchange of ideas, that creates new forms of music. The blues came out of the interaction of these different groups in the city.
So is everybody in our region maybe feeling this buzz, or is this just something we're talking about, the people who live and work in the kind of the central corridor, as we call it? Does this reach out beyond there?
That's a good question. They should be interested, however, because I think this is going to be the central corridor with Cortex, with the entertainment functions, with the medical functions, with the new biotech initiative, is going to be an economic engine for the entire region. And so the fact that we're creating this urban environment with a kind of buzz that makes it exciting is part of what's going to drive the economic development of the entire region. So real estate values in Chesterfield are going to be affected by whether this central corridor takes off with exciting new jobs and new development.
Will our current headlines be meaningful 10 or 20 years from now? And I'm thinking of IKEA, the Loop Trolley. Will those things still be having a meaningful impact down the road?
Well, it depends on, much depends on what we do. Do we once again cause them to work with the other function in the city, so the different land uses kind of work together, or do they become isolated, and do they become simply a project that occurs in one part of the city and surrounded by an asphalt parking lot or something? So much will depend on, and I think St. Louis is getting to the point, for many years it was like, we'll take anything, please come, invest. But I think now we're beginning to see that we have something that's really beginning to take off, and I hope the city will become more selective and choose the kind of functions in the future that really complement these amenities that we're building today.
So what you're saying is we're becoming more dateable, and now we need to be selective.
That's right. That's right. We're not a cheap date anymore. You know, we're pretty good, right? So you're going to have to put something on the table if you want to come here. And you know, the fact that IKEA, it usually locates in a suburban setting, right? The fact that they wanted to locate in the city of St. Louis. Here it is, a city that's lost more than half of its population, right? Has tremendous issues with poverty and loss of population and vacancy and abandonment, but they wanted to be there because they see the urban feel. They wanted that image of young professionals, young people who are excited to be in an urban environment.
Changing our story internally and externally a little bit, maybe?
I think we have to change the story we tell about St. Louis. We've talked about this on this program. I mean, people in St. Louis tend to have this sort of what's the matter with St. Louis attitude, when in fact there's a lot happening. And by the way, it's much more than these big projects. It's the neighborhoods too, where I think there are people who are discovering all these small places in St. Louis that relate to these bigger projects, but that are exciting places to be, with restaurants and bars and coffee shops and jobs.
Todd Swanstrom, thank you very much for starting us off. Speaking of progress, the 9 Network's Jim Kircher catches us up on just that, progress.
There are a lot of high-profile construction and development projects in various stages this summer in St. Louis. There's already been an official groundbreaking on the site of the new IKEA store at Vandeventer and Forest Park Parkway, a project that has both local and regional significance. It is a sign of the growing health of an area that is becoming its own neighborhood, the Cortex district of research facilities and tech and scientific startups, which is also expanding into the newly renovated 4240 Duncan building, and there will likely be additional business and residential development here. But it is IKEA, the Swedish home furnishing chain, that's creating the real buzz among shoppers. St. Louisans won't have to go to Chicago's IKEA, and this will be a regional draw. Even Memphis shoppers know that they won't have to drive to Atlanta when St. Louis's IKEA opens in 2015. There's been no groundbreaking ceremony for the Loop trolley yet, but there is already some preliminary work going on. The gas company has been digging up Delmar east of Skinker to relocate a gas line before the real work begins. Loop entrepreneur Joe Edwards has been working a long time to build a streetcar line 2.2 miles along Delmar and DeBolivar. There are still opponents working to block it, but this is a sign that the stage is being set for streetcars to be running again on Delmar in 2016. And on the north side, there are only a few signs of Paul and Madge McKee's massive redevelopment plans. A big sign near the Musial Veterans Bridge, where there's some preliminary work on a food gas convenience store development. But last week they unveiled some big plans for a healthcare development near the old Pruitt-Igoe site.
Then the urgent care center.
A complex that would include a 3-bed hospital, an urgent care center, a health education center, and a place for a Walgreens or CVS. They need some approvals on this, and it's a ways off, and there are still skeptics who question McKee's abilities and motives. But Paul McKee says even without nothing big being built yet, they are making progress.
What we've been talking about is a phased approach of the entire project being a 15-year project. We've said that since day one, and it has a stepped approach. The first 2 most important things are obviously infrastructure first, but then the food and healthcare are the 2 most important things.
While most of Paul McKee's plans are still on the drawing board, not so at the Gateway Arch. Real progress now on the City Arch River 2015 project. Girders have been put in place covering the depressed interstate lanes downtown to create an unbroken park from the old courthouse to the arch grounds. On the riverfront, the south portion of Lenore K. Sullivan Boulevard has been torn up to raise it up a couple of feet. The north section will be done next year, and the result will be a pedestrian and bicycle-friendly promenade. There will still be floods that will shut it down, but the higher elevation means this won't happen as much. The entire project is running behind schedule, and work on the Arch Museum, including a new entrance that faces downtown, probably is not going to be ready until 2016. For Stay Tuned, I'm Jim Kircher.
All right, thank you, Jim. And we want to make sure we hear from you as well tonight. So find us, hashtag Stay Tuned STL. We want to get your thoughts in on tonight's show as well, and we want to get the thoughts of the two gentlemen at the table, our journalists to kind of bounce some things off of here from the Post-Dispatch, Tim Bryant, and from Next STL, Jeff Whittington. Tim, I sat down and you said, boy, Todd's conversation sparked a few thoughts in you guys. What did you hear?
Well, maybe elaborate just on one thing that you had made the point that in the past that St. Louis has been develop anything you want anywhere, come on down. And Todd said that well, yeah, we're no longer a cheap date. Well, really, we are a cheap date. That almost by any measure, St. Louis is still a very affordable city. And it is encouraging to see that not just anything can be built anywhere at any time, and IKEA is part of that.
Does that mean it's time to stop giving tax breaks, and it's time to make it a little more, I don't know if difficult's the right word, but do we need to stop some of our old incentives? Is that what we're saying here?
Well, there's maybe an experiment in that underway now. That, as we've talked about, the Central Corridor is such a growth area in the city that routinely tax abatement, which is kind of the starter kit of public incentive, has been awarded for almost any project. But just this year, there was a proposal for a large apartment building in the Central West End. Tax abatement was denied that developer. And the thought was that, well, maybe now that area is strong enough to stand on its own without public incentives, but maybe that's not going to work because that project apparently is on hold.
Why are some of these big projects either so polarizing or just so intriguing? I mean, a lot of people go to Next STL to read about development in St. Louis.
Well, I feel change has never been really easy for many in this town. We're kind of set in our ways in some regard. But I find it to be exciting for what it brings. And for instance, with IKEA, it offers the city something unique that will bring people into it.
More than just college kids looking for furniture, you think?
Well, well, yes, I think so. I think I know many young adults that had to make the trip to Chicago to go to the IKEA to come back. Additionally, I think that the money we're spending on the Arch, it's a jewel in our crown, it really is. But I also think that, sometimes I think, nearly 8,000 Arch grants could have been awarded with that money. And I kind of think, wow, what if that had happened? Or what if that would happen one day, and the impact it would have on St. Louis?
What are these projects tea leaves at all, or can you read into or out of what's going on in the region by what's being developed or the dirt you see moving?
You can where they're developed. I mean, it was the IKEA project, and we keep talking about IKEA, but it was an extremely complicated assemblage of property that IKEA could have easily gone out to Wentzville and built, found 50 acres out there and put up a building in 6 months. But there was a real concerted effort, largely a benefit of the Cortex Innovation District, that was instrumental in bringing that IKEA store to St. Louis. But there were so many people involved, from the City Hall to Cortex to private lenders, who assembled that property, worked with Laclede Gas to give up some of its property there to make way for that store. And kind of a corollary development now is kind of lost in sight and all this other development is the Whole Foods. That's another one of these sort of destination type of retailers that is also coming to the city.
And other people look at these developments. Is this true to say, okay, if you have a Whole Foods, that's empirical data that can tell us about your neighborhood and how we might lend money in that neighborhood? Is that
exactly? And it's like Todd was talking about buzz. And if I can make one more point about what Todd had been talking about, that of St. Louis and its growth now, that it might not be helpful to try to compare St. Louis to, say, Chicago or Miami or Boston or or San Diego or even Minneapolis or Austin. Maybe it's more helpful to compare St. Louis now to recent St. Louis. And if you make that comparison, recent St. Louis looks pretty good.
What else is going on? Because the Grove has got a lot of buzz lately, it seems like.
I think overall St. Louis is booming right now, and we need to keep it going across the board, residentially, institutionally, business. We are really riding a wave right now, I feel like. Additionally, I wanted to point out that I think it was David?
Todd.
Or Todd, I'm sorry. Todd said that...
Don't worry, messing up names is sort of my job.
I got
so
you.
if you got one you mess up, I'll do it for you.
Todd mentioned that the Cortex development would have an impact out in Chesterfield. There's actually quite a big development going on out there right now on its own with Monsanto.
Yeah, you've written some about that.
Yeah.
Tell us about that and what's going on there.
Well, in April, I believe, of last year, they announced a $400 million expansion at their 210-acre campus in Chesterfield. It's expected to, I think, create 700 jobs by the time I say first phase, because I have reported that they are planning a second phase right now in excess of 600 million. I've heard between 600 and 700 million dollars, which would put the project expansion over $1 billion, and to be completed, I believe, by 2020, which is a huge expansion. And this is too early to. This is just all speculation, of course, right now. But I've heard there's even talk of consolidating in Chesterfield as their corporate headquarters and abandoning the Creve Coeur campus at some point.
Interesting speculation. Is there an overall plan in all of this? We're talking about Chesterfield. I mentioned the Grove, the Central Corridor. We're going to hear from some folks from the Metro East later. Is there an overall plan in our region? Is there?
Let's hope not.
Yeah.
Let's hope not.
Let's hope not. I mean, what Todd had mentioned, the edifice complex that, like, the football stadium is going to save downtown, or St. Louis Center is going to save downtown, and that's not happened. But you look at places like the Grove or Cherokee Street or Delmar Loop or all of these have grown up mostly by individual decisions by individuals. And you can see the evolution in a lot of these areas. Let's say take the Grove, for example, that is not that many years ago, it was just a strip of bars along a stretch of kind of sketchy Manchester. Other businesses moved in, suddenly had a name. It was marketed as the Grove, and now it's in this transition of there's an architecture firm, a public relations firm is going to move in, people are moving in. That, to me, is how you build neighborhoods and build cities.
The cohesiveness will come with the infill, the people and the businesses that start to come in and join together.
But that's not to say institutions aren't essential. Like Cortex and Barnes-Hosburg, Barnes, BJC, that this huge complex of concentration of employees and people and development that can knit these areas together from the Grove to Cortex to Central West End to Clayton, and suddenly that, hey, we have a city that succeeds.
What's going to happen with Northside regeneration?
Well, it grades out as T for tenacious, at least right now, that Paul McKee has worked for so many years on this project, and we just saw the prepared video of his latest thing for a healthcare facility, and he also is trying to get a grocery food operation underway, and that makes sense because that's what that area really, really needs. And his latest thing, it seems like, is to try to perhaps draw the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. Apparently he's going to move in the next decade or so. And he's talked about, well, maybe it could go there, or he'd probably be just as happy if it went to his North Park development in North County.
Oh, and he expects, what, 50,000 jobs to be created through the state?
I don't know. I mean, it's 3,000. They're right now, on Arsenal Street, and I think more than 5,000 at least at some point. If those, the city lifeblood almost of revenue is the earnings tax, and if shipping 3,000 to 5,000 jobs out of the city, they'd still be in the region, but what does that say to City Hall?
In totality, I had heard 50,000 at the completion of the project, if it ever comes to that. I'm not ready to give up on the North Side stagnation project yet, but I'd like to see a little more getting accomplished. I genuinely want to believe Mr. McKee is doing this for all the right reasons, and I lean that way. I just like to see a little more activity start getting going. But then I read something where Jeff Rainford said it took 40 years for Soulard to get redeveloped and be made over. So we'll see.
We'll leave it there. Jeff and Tim, thanks for your insights and your reporting. We appreciate it. Okay, hashtag stay tuned STL. Let's see what you are currently saying. Welcome back to the show. Ryan McClure with City Arch River. Okay, the arch is, if not the biggest, one of the biggest projects going on right now. We saw in Jim's piece the girders over that depressed section of what was 70 and is now 44. Catch us up. Where do we stand on the arch grounds?
Sure. Well, as you saw earlier, we're heavily under construction right now. Anybody that's been downtown can kind of see that. But the park over the highway, the roadway improvements that MoDOT is making, and the riverfront, both under construction right now. Last weekend, MoDOT crews put in the girders over the highway so people can actually see the outline and the shape of what this new seamless connection to the arch is going to look like from the city. And then in the next month, we're actually going to break ground on the park, the arch grounds. So lots of great stuff going on. So it's really exciting progress.
Are we still getting a new revamped museum with a new entrance?
Oh, absolutely, yes. So the museum will break ground later this year. Completely new museum experience, updated to be new, interactive, engaging to visitors, and tell the story of westward expansion and the story of St. Louis in new ways.
Will it be done, and does it matter if it's done, or was it promised that it would be done by October of 2015?
So it will not be done by that date. You know, originally that was our plan to get everything done by the 50th anniversary of the arch. A lot will be done by that date, but items like the museum, some landscaping will open in 2016. So it's not far behind.
And is that a disappointment to the people, to you guys that are trying to pull this off?
Well, I mean, we obviously wanted to get it done by that milestone, by that date, but you know, the important thing here is this is happening. It's a reality, and you can see the construction, you can see the progress happening every day, and it's going to get done, and it's going to be something that we're all going to be really proud of when it's done.
I don't know, a lot of projects have those timetable issues, if you will. Let's talk about what it might do, or do you want it to do for downtown? Is the goal for this to spur other development?
So we actually had 10 design goals during the design competition that gave us the Van Valkenburg design that's being implemented today. One of those goals is to be a catalyst for further development in the region. And you know, you're already seeing other projects in development that is spurred by this project. Laclede Gas said one of the reasons that they're moving into the Philip Johnson building is because of City Arch River. Some residential development downtown, some of those developers have said it's because of City Arch River, and I think you're going to see some great things happening in areas like Laclede's Landing because of this project.
Can you give us any sneak peeks, or have you got people on that are coming to you saying that we want to partner with you in any way, or anything else that you're hearing?
You know, nothing. You know, that's far enough along to kind of to talk about right now in those areas. But I mean, I think it's pretty safe to say that you're going to see further development that happens around the edges of the park because of this renovation.
Is the goal to reignite our passion for our arch, or to bring people in from outside and increase the tourism to the arch?
Well, I think it's both. You know, obviously, you know, tourism helps drive our regional economy, and you know, our economic impact studies say that this, you know, more tourists and a longer time stayed because of this project is going to have a huge economic impact, about the equivalent of an additional Cardinals baseball season each year. But we also want St. Louisans to come down the arch more, see this as their local park. On average, St. Louisans go down the arch once every 10 years right now.
Really?
And you know, that's when they have family in town, they want to see the arch, but we want people to come down. This is our park. It may be a national park, and we're proud that it's a national park, but it's also our park. This is St. Louis's undeniable symbol.
What are you hearing from the community? I mean, I know there was a fair amount of public input or public meetings, perhaps. Is that process still ongoing, or do you hear feedback from people so far?
Absolutely. I mean, we had a lot of we had a public process throughout the design competition, and afterward, public meetings, public input. We have a citizen advisory committee that is still advising us on. We're kind of done with the design stage, but now programming and other areas. But I mean, you know, in terms of what we're hearing, it's a lot of positive feedback. you know, it was really great to see the work happening this weekend on the Park of the Highway. Channel 5 actually did a story on how, you know, people came down
to watch
it happen. And there's an interview with a with a father and son that said they had come down to see history happening. So lots of excitement surrounding the project. It's really, really cool to watch.
Will we be able to walk across that park before 2015 October? Or is that part of the opening and the unveiling?
Well, you know, that as construction moves along, we'll be able to kind of, that'll be clearer as we go along. But we know that the structure will be done by the end of this year, and then we'll move on to landscaping, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Very good. Ryan McClure, thanks for coming back to the show. We appreciate your time.
All right, thank you,
Casey. Thanks for the update. Okay, let's go back to social media. So not all of the development is above ground. Let's talk about what's going on beneath the ground in terms of fiber optics and high-speed internet and other communications and what that means to this conversation. Let me do some introductions here. Lisa Peck from the city of Highland, Illinois. Thanks for being here. And David Sandell, Sandell & Associates. David, I'll start with you because you've been very active and very involved in something we saw earlier in Jim's piece, the trolley. What's going on underneath that trolley?
Well, what we did was we decided when the trolley project was evolving a few years ago, approximately 4 years ago, that if the trolley was going to open up all the streets and lay track, why wouldn't we go ahead and lay a gigabit fiber optic system at the same time as a economic development initiative? So we started that 4 years ago. We went through a feasibility study process. We eventually put a not-for-profit board in place, which is called the Loop Media Hub. And as of a week ago, we submitted our finished design for the entire system to the trolley.
Before you explain the benefits or what it might be able to do, explain what we're talking about. I'll open this up to both of you when we're talking about this gigabit. I think maybe the most recent example people have heard of is Kansas City and Google Fiber. Is that what we're talking about here?
Yes, on a very small scale. So what's unique about the Loop, or I should say, everybody's heard about Kansas City, this huge deployment. 2 cities, 14 municipalities, hundreds of millions of dollars. It's really a next generation cable TV environment. So over here in St. Louis, we're looking at this. What can we do on a very small scale, very inexpensive, that's going to have the right recipe in the right neighborhood, the right amenities, organizations, and resources to create really high economic development impact. And in the Loop, that happens, economic development impact happens because it will attract companies, data-oriented companies, social media companies, healthcare, education companies who want to develop the next round of internet applications.
Because the internet is that much faster in that part of town.
Yes.
I think I've heard you use the word boutique.
Yes.
In terms of versus the entire area getting it. So how does Highland come into this conversation?
Highland has a gigabit system that is available to 80% of our residents, and all businesses are able to connect to it at this point in time.
Help people get a grasp. Highland's about what, 45 minutes to the east of St. Louis?
30 miles.
30 miles east of St. Louis. How big of a city is it?
10,000.
And you said 80% have what we're talking about trying to do, or what Kansas City is trying to do.
They have the ability to connect to our system, which is a true fiber to the premises FTTP system. So they're
super high speed internet going to individual homes.
Yes, and businesses.
And who's doing this?
We actually have a penetration rate of about 40%, which is pretty darn good, actually. We've got several businesses that we've been able to retain simply because we have this fiber available.
But the city itself is doing it, is that right?
The city itself is doing it.
So internet as a public utility almost.
Yes, and the city of Highland has its own municipal power. So they've had that for many, many years. And they, in Illinois, you're able to do a fiber system if you have the municipal power.
And how is it being received? How are people using this in their homes?
Yes.
And they're willing to pay for it?
Yes. In Highland, you can get, we'll talk about residential first, you can get a 20 meg connection, and it's a symmetrical connection, which means it's 20 up and 20 down, which is very, and David, you can speak to, that's not typically the way the providers provide the service. It's usually your upload speed is much lower than the download speed. That is available for $19.95.
So that sounds amazing. Let's pretend like I don't even know what those numbers mean, and we're not exactly pretending. Why is this such a great thing for the city of Highland or for the Loop? What's the advantage of this?
Well, so far the city of Highland has this project went for a referendum before the voters. 78% of the voters voted for this to bond this project out. Pretty incredible. Pretty impressive. So the commitment has been honored to those residents so far to build out the system and focus internally. Now that we're at the 80% build out, we're starting to, be like, yes, hey, we do have this, and turning our attention outward and using it as a traction piece.
Someone on Twitter just said this is some of the most important work in our region. Robin Wabi said that. Why would she? Why would Robin say such a thing?
Well, we're entering into a new paradigm. We've left the industrial age center of city and suburban areas. We're moving away from that now. St. Louis is becoming an exceptional region of innovation districts and innovation neighborhoods, and they're just starting to percolate up. So we know about Cortex, which is an institutional view of that. And then the Loop is developing into an innovation neighborhood with Loop Media Hub, Loop Data Rail. And then right behind that is Grand Center and Washington Avenue. These will become these centers, the new factories of creation, starting up new companies and innovation. And that's really what we're going to be about. We have to find a way to bring that story together, brand it, and we'll gain national and international attention, because every city's looking at the right form of how to do this. And we seem to be doing it organically, which is the most important part of this.
I feel like, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And I was going to say that press that you were just talking about getting noticed, that's something that St. Louis is starting to have going for it. The St. Louis tech scene has been written up on the Huffington Post, Fortune.
Stay tuned, STL.
Yes, absolutely. Business Weekly, Forbes. I mean, this is national press that the St. Louis area is now getting for this tech scene that's being created.
So how do we get everybody excited about this? If this is kind of like the first time some people are hearing about this, if getting high-speed fiber in the Loop and other places, and I'd not heard that Highland was doing this, how do we get people on board if this is so important?
We recently changed our direction in planning. We had originally been planning to wait for the trolley to be built, and then once fiber was available, we would deploy wireless. That's taken 4 years for us to get to this point. So we decided recently to lead with wireless, and we're actively working on a plan for gigabit wireless in the Loop right now. And part of that planning is to have it in the large theaters and restaurants. So when we release our plan and we're ready, we're going to invite the entire community into the Loop and experience the difference for themselves in the theaters and restaurants and outside on the streets. And then as the trolley is built, the fiber will come back later and we'll add that capacity in too.
And see, I think that we need to have as many voices as possible speaking a consistent message.
Yes.
And the message needs to be, we want you here, and we're willing to build the infrastructure and create the environment to make that happen.
Okay. Thank you both for your time. We'll be right back. Coming up, Mr. Joe Edwards from the Loop.
Thank you.
I'm pleased to welcome back to the show Joe Edwards, the man behind much of the success of the Loop we were just talking about. Before I ask you what you have in your hand, are you on board, pun intended, with what David was talking about there in the high speed?
I definitely am. I think it'll be a marvelous game changer and a great example for St. Louis of how to move forward in that regard. The Loop Trolley project is going to put 2 conduits in for this project. They have their own agenda and all, which they have to follow and raise the money and all, but we are going to help out any way we can.
Well, you've got the earth turned already there.
Yeah, it'd be 1/10 the cost. Since the streets will be torn up already, it'll be really, really inexpensive compared to doing it. Yeah, relatively.
Okay, you brought a prop. Tell me what's going on here, and tell me what's the latest.
Well, things are moving forward, and who wouldn't want to ride on this? I mean, just...
I'm having flashbacks to Mr. Rogers. We're on PBS, and you have a toy train. This is excellent.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Things are going great. It's out for bid right now. The bids are due July 31st, and I think they'll come in under budget or the same as the consultants recommend or estimate, and then we'll pick a contractor and construction will start. It's exciting because utility relocation is already happening. The Clean Gas is moving some lines, AT&T is working on things, so it's going forward. And hopefully the actual track part will start in September, and we'll just have a marvelous year and a quarter to get it done by the end of 2015 and up and running spring of 2016 after all the safety tests and all the training and all. We want to make sure to do it the right way, do it first class, and that's why it'll take a little extra time, but it'll be worth it.
Remind us where it's going to go now that we might be just not too long from seeing it start to happen here.
It'll be a 2.2-mile route that will go from the library in University City, east on Delmar, to Bolivar, and south on Bolivar, inside Forest Park to the south side of the Missouri History Museum. And there, people can get off and get on the circulator around the park and get to the Science Center, the zoo, the Muni, every place, the art museum. It'll be wonderful. It'll connect the Loop to 12 million visitors to Forest Park attractions and vice versa, and be a great way for St. Louis to tell the rest of the country, wow, this is a first-class city. We're embracing clean electric transit as other cities are starting to do more and more. It's the future of cities in this country. There's a great article in the Post recently that pointed out that 20 years ago, 19-year-olds, 87% of them had driver's licenses. Today, only 70% do. That's how much the young people want to live in livable, walkable communities where they don't have to pay for tires, gas, car repairs, insurance, everything that goes along with the expense of a car. Young couples could have 1 car and not 2, and we're setting that pattern so that hopefully we'll expand it. This will be a prototype of how to extend to other cities and other neighborhoods in our city and connect with Metrolink.
So this could, so while some might think this is just a tourist attraction, you think it could be real transit for the city?
Oh, it could be real transit for the city, and it's happening in other cities. The best feasibility study, it really isn't a feasibility study, it's to look to New Orleans, the one out to the Garden District, they've had over a century. And that neighborhood never went up and down all the decades that other neighborhoods in New Orleans did, the same way they have in St. Louis and other cities. They had to decide whether to do a rubber tire look-alike for expansion of their transportation system or do a fixed track system. They've done 2 fixed track systems at huge amounts of money, and it's paying off. It costs more in the beginning to put in a fixed track system, but the operating costs are almost identical to a rubber tire system because combustible engines, burn up faster, and ridership 70% greater.
Can you see that? We just dropped it. There was a sign that's right over there. Check out the sign that says the Loop there over your trolley. Have you seen this rendering before?
I've seen the rendering. It's I don't know who did the rendering actually, but it's going to be marvelous when it does happen.
Is there any connection to the Grove? A quick tangent, that looks an awful lot like the sign in the Grove.
It does, and that's why I'm saying I didn't design that.
Okay, got it.
I appreciate the Grove immensely, and I think that was very smart of them to do that sign. No, I've spoken for years about doing a sign like that, not exactly like that, but over Delmar at each end, welcome to the Loop. And someday we'll get the funding to do that.
Of course, this is not done without some criticism, without lawsuits. Are you okay with that?
Well, I am. I think it's a great country where anybody can file a suit for any reason and all, and you can be outspoken about it. For every 4 people that still have questions about this project, there are 40,000 in favor of it. I can't tell you how many times a day people come up, oh, when's it going to happen? I can't wait. I can't wait to bring my grandchildren in, get an ice cream cone. I can't, well, I used to ride it. And young people saying, wow, I was in so-and-so city. I was in Memphis, and they have a great system. It's great you're bringing it to St. Louis.
So put me in the mind of a developer. Is it hard to sell your vision? Are the rest of us a little long to catch up?
In this case, not so. Well, it took a while. I mean, I started this in 1997, so I guess it takes a while to
You've been doing it a lot
there,
longer than that when we look at the Loop, too. I mean,
right. Oh, yeah, the Loop long before that, 1970s early. But one reason it's taking this long was real important to me to try to get this project where we didn't have to use money out of the general budget of either the city of St. Louis or U-City. And that's tricky to do, and we accomplished that, which is amazing. $43 million project coming out of separate funds, so it doesn't have an impact on people's real estate taxes directly and all that, and can set a tone for expansion around it. Lawsuits are funny. The federal judge, dismissed them. Appeal was made, but I'm not too worried about it at all. I think we have compelling reasons why we've done everything right. We've been very careful to make sure to get Federal Transit Administration approval throughout every process and the court's approvals.
Okay, so you could see the Loop before the rest of us could see it. You could see this trolley before the rest of us see it. What do you see next for St. Louis that we might not see?
For St. Louis in general, I don't know. I think we're about to enter a golden 5-year period, though. I really do. We were almost entering it when the Great Recession hit and slowed a lot of great projects up or stopped them in their tracks. I think in the next 5 years, St. Louis's central corridor is going to get solid, not all commercial, but just solid all the way from Ladue and Clayton to the Loop, Central West End, Grand Center, Locust, and all the way downtown to the river. And when that happens, we'll accomplish the east to west part, but it's really important we do the north and south part. It'll enable us to start branching out to north and south even more. There's great neighborhoods, especially south right now with Cherokee and the Grove and all coming up, which is just magnificent. And the whole Cortex IKEA thing is also just incredible for really, good jobs and all. And the North Side projects, we need to branch that out even more, and I think after this next 5-year period, that'll happen.
Okay, last question. Things change fast these days. I mean, I want my new cell phone software. I want this, that, and the other. It's all happening. You're working on that since 1997. Do developers have the same luxury? Is it hard to be a developer in an impatient society?
Yeah, it is. It is. Although if by building by consensus really is important to me to get more and more people involved and accepting of a project. And when you do it that way, it takes more time. If you try to ram something through with legislation or something, it might be faster, but you might not have everybody in back of it. And I'd rather have people in back of it. St. Louis is can be such a positive city, and it's time for us to get positive by building by consensus, and that's been my goal all these years.
Joe, thanks for your time. I appreciate it. Thanks for bringing the PBS-like prop. I appreciate it. That's good.
Clang, clang, clang.
Now you're making a St. Louis reference. That's good. I like it. Okay. Joe Edwards, everybody. Okay, we'll be right back. Let's take another look at what you're saying at hashtag Stay Tuned STL. All right, let's get some insights from this table here. I'll do the introductions first, starting with Travis Sheridan. 2 weeks in a row. Thanks for coming back.
We're old friends.
Well, you might be old. Venture Cafe Foundation. Yeah. You're not. I'm kidding. Also, Patty Hayda, welcome back to the show from the Sam Fox School of Design over at Washington University, and Jason Johnson from Renaissance Development Associates. Next SDL, I believe, just tweeted that Joe started small. Let's kind of nourish and prop up, maybe is the wrong word, but encourage more Joe Edwards. Are we doing that?
I think so. I mean, and I'll defer to Jason, but you know, when I first came to town, I moved to town in January of 2012. I got here on a Tuesday in late January. On Thursday, there was an event down at the bridge downtown. It was a Pachacacha event, and that's where my wife and I went to first experience it. And it was an event where I got to meet a lot of people from the creative class, and it was densely packed, and there was a lot of activity and a lot of energy. And that was one place, and that's one entrepreneur doing one thing in one building, and that same entrepreneur has done several things with other restaurants throughout town. So yes, I think building by building, block by block, business by business is a very smart way, systematic way to start moving things forward.
Yeah, Joe's really kind of been our mentor and our hero for what we're trying to do in the Midtown Alley neighborhood. You know, we started with a couple buildings as my master's thesis right out of college, and I moved to, 12 years later, we're 40 buildings done, but we still keep looking back at what Joe's done and his successes in the Loop. And we're never going to be the Loop from the retail side, but we, try really hard to bring in some creative restaurants and really are trying to build a community that's embracing the community, the creative, collaborative community that we've embraced. We've got about 30 creative agencies down there, and we keep trying to push that urban plan based off of some of the models that Joe set for us in St. Louis that work.
I think small-scale incremental growth is very important for St. Louis. We've had a lot of big-scale failed planning projects, and the kind of vibrancy of the city that Todd talked about in the beginning has to do with this urban fabric that we have. St. Louis has an amazing stock of buildings, historic homes, warehouses, so it makes sense to really leverage those great buildings and work slowly with the community.
Is slow possible? Is that harder to do now? I'm just going back to what I asked Joe. I mean, everything happens so fast.
I think the economic recession in a way might have helped. In some areas, if you look at what's happening in Botanical Heights, you could go smaller scale. You could, they cleared 6 blocks and then they came back and the recession hit, and one by one they started looking at what buildings they could save, where they could infill, more time to talk to people, find out what's needed. I think, we live right by the Loop too, and we have seen a lot of the changes, and it's we're there because it's a vibrant urban part of the city, which is what this creative class wants. So the question is always, I think we're attracting the development, the market in terms of the creative class, but we have to also always be thinking about the whole city and how we remake parts of the city and what's happening in the rest of the city and how we can kind of spread out the good development that's happening.
Yeah, so, and I think if you use a tortoise and the hare analogy, right? I mean, it's fits and starts sometimes with the hare, but if the tortoise is slow and steady and methodical, when you have that slow, steady, methodical process, you can take other neighborhoods into consideration. So if I'm developing in this neighborhood, I can spend time figuring out how my development is going to impact neighborhoods maybe 5 or 10 miles away. And you can't do that if you just try to rush into changing something and changing the landscape.
So do we leave that to the developers to make those considerations, or is there a regional entity that needs to be laying out a plan or a focus or maybe a goal of some kind?
Well, so the neighborhood itself and the buildings that are in the neighborhood kind of speak to how the plan's going to go in a way. Having what your anchors around that particular neighborhood really play into it in a big way as well. And when you're talking about kind of the speed, one of the things that we've discovered as we're plunking along in our neighborhood is that you really need to build the neighborhood in a certain way. And you have to bring enough people in order to bring enough restaurants in. You need to bring enough restaurants and people and office users in to bring enough retail. And it's kind of like the chicken and the egg, and it takes a while to incubate those things. And as you start getting momentum, it can happen a little faster, but Rome wasn't built in a day, and there's a reason why that term's still around.
But I think it's important what you're doing, and again, back to this historic fabric that I think is now being leveraged by a lot of developments in the city. The IKEA stands out in that it's a suburban model. It's a big box model. So while it's amazing for the city, it's great. It's a great company. It's eco-minded. It's a design-forward company. But we should be very careful in how it sits on the street and making sure that we're generating good urbanism.
Because some people don't like the way it's been designed in terms of the way it's sitting there.
Yeah,
Is
and
that right?
it's designed on an economic model. That's what big box, stores do. And
Specifically, people don't like that you're going to have a big parking lot on the corner there. They like to see the building on the corner.
Well, what you don't want to see is people pull in, go in the store, get right back in their car because their car's so far away from other restaurants and retail surrounding it that they go back to Chesterfield and they don't actually utilize any of the other restaurants or retailers around it. So that's why that model is so important to get right particularly in the urban core.
It is
very. And I don't think that I don't think people are going to go to IKEA and say, let's make a day of it. Let's go to IKEA, have some meatballs, and make a day of it. But I think the fact that IKEA is there, it's going to pop up more residential that's there, and that residential is going to spawn additional retail and restaurants and whatnot. And for that community, it's going to be much more walkable. But I don't think the amount of stuff that I've purchased when I go to IKEA, it is never a walkable experience for me because I can't take all those packages back on public transit or on my bike. But I think that it is an anchor that will stimulate smaller development throughout and stimulate some additional residential development, which will fuel the universities and will also fuel the neighborhoods, and hopefully will create a ripple effect so it does creep over into the Grove and it does creep over toward North St. Louis as well.
Are we flexible enough in what we're building and the way we're doing our city? If this part of the process needs to be the tortoise, just about everything else is the hare. What if we have driverless cars in 10 years? Maybe less. Is our city flexible enough in the way we're developing?
Better ask the taxi cab commission about that one.
Well, what's funny? We built the highways in the 50s that spurred the whole growth out of the city into the suburbs, and now we're building the information data highway, and it's spurring all of this growth back into the city. So, infrastructure can have profound effects on cities and how they grow. We just have to make sure that we're thinking about the entire city.
Don't be alarmed. We're going to bring
corridors.
everyone, while we're talking, we're going to get everyone back in. For the sake of saving time, we're going to just keep going here with the post-show right now on the show. Are we back? I want to go back just a second, though. Are we considering other neighborhoods? Do we need an overall, I guess I keep going back to the word plan.
American cities in general have planning departments are typically not driving development. The public-private partnership is the way of life now in American cities. So, it would be great to have strong public sector support driving these projects, ensuring that the whole city is getting addressed, of course.
Okay, so we mentioned earlier that the project in the Central West End did not get tax incentives. Is it time to stop that? How are we as a date? Can we afford to be picky? Can we afford to say, IKEA, you need to switch your design, or we don't want you?
It would be great if we could. We need to, do we want good urbanism? That's the question.
And I don't
we want a walkable, good city, yeah.
I don't think we need a citywide plan, but it would be nice to have standards. Right, form-based code standards or some sort of standard that each neighborhood can pick up, and maybe the standards are developed within the neighborhood so that it retains the authenticity of each neighborhood. But I think standards are important. I don't necessarily think we need a widespread plan because once you put a plan in place, it's going to be outdated the moment you dot the last I and cross the last T. But I think standards are very important.
I would be careful to overuse the word plan. Plans are very fixed, and I would think we need a framework, which is just a kind of direction and a sort of set of goals that are articulated. Yeah. So I wouldn't say plan as a hard line drawing necessarily.
And much of the discussion tonight has been about the central corridor area where there's seen value of a plan or a framework or form-based code or whatever, but it's, I think, interesting to think that what's going on there now is an overlay of what's been happening in that part of St. Louis for well over a century, where there's the march of institutions west, followed by residents and commercial uses, and now we're seeing a replay of that in new development.
We have 90 seconds before we transition from the air to online, keeping that goal in mind. I'm just curious if this, I want to go back, how important, Todd, resident philosopher, is the infrastructure we're talking about with the internet to all of the rest of this conversation?
Well, I think what's interesting is cities are, as I said, are about face-to-face interactions, and the internet's about reaching out to the entire globe, right? It transcends space, but actually the two can reinforce one another. In other words, by having these kinds of high-speed connections, you can have an exciting place, and part of why that place will be exciting is because people will interact there face-to-face, not just over the internet, right? So the two can be, I think, very exciting together.
And I would add to that, to what both of them are saying, and Patty, that information highway is causing movement backward, inward, but it's not just the central business district. They're going to settle in different innovation districts and innovation neighborhoods because people want to have a sense of place and cultural distinction. But once we get connected and we have this loose framework of collaboration where we share, this will be huge for St. Louis.
Hold that thought. We'll take it online to staytuned.9net.org. Thanks for joining us on air. Okay, we're good. So I cut you off. Did you finish your thought there? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so this loop, we need to put in place a loose sense of framework of collaboration and communication between our different districts, innovation neighborhoods, because this will be huge for St. Louis because we're so used to being separated. And we live in the separation, and it disconnects us from each other. So once we just simply agree that we're going to do this, things are going to change much, much faster. And when we do this, it'll be the beginning of us getting national recognition, international recognition as an organic regional innovation community that's figuring this out on its own.
That's already kind of starting, according to the Brookings Institution.
Yes.
They're big fans of Cortex.
Well, and kind of to carry on with your theme a little bit here, my background is actually in economic development. And what is the cool, awesome thing about this is these startups, these high-tech startups, retaining them, be it a graduate from a local institution that we keep here that doesn't go away, or bringing in new startups and new companies. It's a win for everybody. So much in economic development is about a win for me, a loss for you. This is a win for everybody. It raises everybody up to have this going on. So that's the exciting thing for me to see.
I think we should really view, I will preach of this for a while. I think we need to view this high-speed connectivity and the 1 gigabyte fiber as water, gas, electric. I mean, it is a basic utility that we cannot attract as an economic developer or as an innovator or having innovative communities or having basic needs in a community like Old North or North County. People need connectivity because that is a basic utility now. And we can't attract people or keep people unless we start thinking of these things, just like transportation, as a basic utility.
And the IKEA store goes against the Cortex master plan for sustainability, if you really think about it. It kills a lot of pedestrian flow, I'd imagine.
So we have a great innovation taking place here on an urban level in St. Louis right now. You mentioned the Brookings study, which said that the future of America's innovation districts, but we're evolving in innovation districts in the first innovation neighborhoods with what's happening with the trolley and data rail, and then later with Grand Center and Washington Avenue. We're in a moment where we can pull ahead of the rest of the pack just by deciding to collaborate and start sharing information in this loose framework, but really support this bottom grassroots effort. And things like that could spill over. You could spill over into North St. Louis because that's what North St. Louis needs badly.
It will spill over.
But it just takes people, more jobs and people. And that's what St. Louis is not getting. We're a slow growth metropolitan area.
Or flat.
Or flat. And I mean, it's great to see these things happening, but again, it's kind of the point I was trying to make earlier that maybe it's not helpful to compare us to the super high growth cities, but to compare ourselves to ourselves. And we're doing okay, but maybe we shouldn't be satisfied with that.
Where do this is on Twitter, people are talking about the abandoned buildings in not just North St. Louis, but predominantly North St. Louis. Where does that come into a conversation about development?
Oh, vacant buildings, the research is clear. Every vacant building cascades negative impacts on all the properties around it. So if you get a certain number of vacant properties in a neighborhood, you're going to have contagious abandonment. We've got areas that are really burdened by this. And so it's a major issue, and how we're going to get spread the wealth to the other parts of the city, especially North St. Louis, I think is going to be a big issue in the next decade.
So using our model that we're developing on the loop with the trolley and data rail, if we extended that concept to the Crown Center neighborhood and called that Crown Data Rail and include that development right around there, people are going to move over there instantly.
I'm 160 paces from Crown, so I would appreciate that if we could have that there.
And that could ignite this organic quality of North Side, because we're now joining where we've been massively separated.
And that's a compelling story to tell.
Compelling for St.
And
Louis.
a compelling story is what will get us the national and the international press.
And St. Louis is a region that's like a rubber band. It has exceptional talent. It's been held back like this for decades and is just waiting to go boing, and we're right at the tip of this right now.
I agree with you. We're right there. We're ready to move forward, and we need to.
Can a city like the size, would you agree that it's a utility, the internet?
It's on a long, slow march to becoming a utility. It will be painful in the United States. There's a lot of conflicting interests, but the model that we're developing in the loop is service provider independent. We can work with anyone. It's our organizational model and a collaborative economic model which really drives the impact. So it actually helps service providers expand faster.
And this is so important, I mean, even to educating, you know, the next generation. The schools now are giving iPads and computer devices to, you know, their students. You know, to have that ability to connect is just crucial.
The floor is open. I've got a bunch of notes here that I need to pack. You know, I want to see what I missed. I'm leaving out you guys, and I'm leaving out Joe in the post-show. I'm sorry. What's on your mind?
Well, no, I can say I look at a lot of American cities, and you're talking about is St. Louis. You know, who do we measure against? And for sure, we're right up in against all of these others. We're doing the same things that a lot of cities are doing. We're returning to our riverfront. We're leveraging institutional anchors to spur development around the city. We're looking at the stock of buildings that we have. These are all paradigms of development across the country. So that's the good news for St. Louis. We have our own particularities, of course, and issues, and so we need to make sure that you know, development, the high-tech sector is great, the jobs that it will produce are great, but there are also low-tech jobs that are needed to be had. So, you know, that's kind of outside of the equation. But we're, you know, Green Bay, Wisconsin redeveloped their riverfront. Chattanooga, Louisville, you know, I'm not talking about just the New Yorks and San Franciscos. So it's a lot of momentum.
It's interesting to think about some of the projects we talked about today that are on the horizon, because what really, from my perspective on the smaller scale development, really is the trickle down in the fact that if the more people we can get here, right, the more people that are going to be using the restaurants and using the retailers, right? And as people start making those two entities successful and more of those things need to start coming into play, the more people are going to want to live and work in those neighborhoods. And so again, you know, some of the stuff that's on the forefront that's actually happening is going to, again, kind of help our central corridor grow, help with that fringe development, but help with that chicken and the egg of getting the people here so those things that are always the hardest, the restaurants and the retail, are successful because some of these things that we've talked about today parlay themselves into making it easier for us to fill the residential and the commercial spaces, because people, again, want to be in those areas that have strong retail and restaurant components. And so that's really, to me, from a small scale development, what's most exciting about some of the things that we talked about today is I actually do think those are going to make a big difference in St. Louis in the next few years.
And that's where government or public investment comes in, and if nothing else, transportation, to get from all these places you're talking about conveniently, cheaply, you know, and maybe if we're a real city, doing it without a car, doing it on a streetcar. And because, you know, there's an axiom that, you know, when people move, they spend money. And if we get people moving in St. Louis, they'll spend money. And
when they physically move.
Physically move, yeah. They spend money.
I think the Cortex District is really, in my opinion, leading the way with regard to modeling density and the importance of density, and putting everybody, you know, because we, you know, the old Jane Jacobs rule of eyes on the street and the perception of safety. When you have all those, not just services, but people working nearby and living nearby, and you have more bodies just bouncing around and colliding and having opportunities, the there are perceptions of St. Louis not being safe. I learned about that when I was in California and moving out here. But in reality, it is a fairly safe community, and the more that we can, use what's happening in Cortex, and if it does work, and I believe it will, then you could use that same type of model and that same sort of type of density in other neighborhoods as well. It's not a cookie cutter approach, and it's never going to be a silver bullet, but I think density and a return to a tighter network, both information highway network and even people network, is really going to help propel us.
Lisa, I'm just curious if Highland likes their high-speed internet. They voted for it. They are paying for it. Do they care about what we're talking about tonight? Do they care about IKEA and Cortex?
I think it's not completely on everyone's radar screen, and I think that can be said about any area that we're talking about, and I think that we all need, and everyone needs to be on an education campaign to talk about just how important this is, and that's our job, and that's why we're all sitting here tonight.
So I think,
thank you for the opportunity.
I think we've really hit on some really strong core things here that have been coming together for a long time. I think we need, as a team and a group, to consider that we should try two things. I think that this group should get together and describe what that loose framework is and come back to Stay Tuned STL with what that means. And I think that we should also talk with Galamich, CEO of KETC, and how do we use PBS as a new form of community engagement to get this education and loose framework modeled out to really get the rocket going in St. Louis, because I think we're ready to do it.
Well, and we need to get the stories out too. That's
you see these alliances. I mean, you see what the Beacon did with KWMU. Yeah, I mean, we can do that over here. I'll be back next week.
Joe, this is all about my pay grade. Give us a last word. I want. What do you wish maybe the rest of the community knew that developers would like for them to know?
That the transit-oriented development is happening already just with the promise of the trolley. There's an $11.4 million project that just got completed at Hamilton and Del Mar, an area nobody thought development would happen, and they did it because the trolley was about to happen ahead of time. They wanted to get in there. Renovated one building, built a new 3-story building. The Washington University $80 million project on Del Mar is magnificent. Would that have come without the trolley? Probably, because the loop is coming back strongly, but it's just an added bonus. It's another reason to tell students around the country, come to Washington University and stay here once you graduate. It's marvelous.
There's also some other developments that are taking place, around the Wabash Station and east that are just astounding. And I'm just really excited about the impact of all the stuff we're working on. It's going to be amazing.
Okay. I think the challenge has been put out there that this is all on you guys.
That's right.
I just prepare the coffee pot. You guys do it. Thanks, guys.